Right, I am putting us live now, and so I don't know at what point. I got to make sure that I have no other YouTube videos on and I have all of my stuff muted because I did that, but we are here. Everything looks good. Let me just double check and make sure that this is playing and then we can get started. Yes, we are good. All right, I'm watching the chat. Gary, you're watching the chats too.
I got
And
the chats. I got you.
we are started. Okay, Gary, you can lead us in.
Yes. What's happening, everyone? Welcome to another installment of the Accountability Success Circle webinar. This one, which is like, I'm super excited for very personal reasons, being that I am a parent. We're going through all kinds of stuff with COVID, and let's just be honest, it's a hot mess. But in the Accountability Success Circle, every month we have a different theme. And this theme is all about yourself, the inner self. How can you just take care of that? We've been doing all kinds of things inside the circle that we'll mention that at the end. But let's just get into it. This one is all about defeating burnout and escaping that survival mode. And whether you're a parent or not, I am 100% confident that you're going to get some amazing strategies because we have an amazing guest. And how about we just introduce our guest? Are we ready to do that? Should we just do that? Yep.
Go for it.
Nods. Yep. Cool. All right. Um, Sarah, please help me pronounce your last name.
It's Argenal with a soft, like Arsenal with a soft J.
Okay. All right. Cool. I have a tendency of butchering. It could be the easiest thing, and I'm like, I don't know. Like the tongue
And
just like,
same. And you wouldn't believe the variations of my last name that I've heard over the years.
yeah. So Sarah Argenal, welcome. Just a few like fun facts about you. I'm just going to read because I want to make sure that people understand this. But Sarah, this is what's so exciting. Sarah is on a mission to eradicate the burnout epidemic that's crushing working parents so they can finally enjoy these precious years of their life. She has over 2 decades of experience in the areas such as psychotherapy, professional coaching, and complex project management in a global law firm. So, like, you put that together, this is like the Voltron of coaches
The
here.
perfect
Like,
storm.
right?
Yes.
And she has a sustainable and long-term approach to personal fulfillment for working parents. And like I said, whether you're a working parent or not, if you can nail this now, this is going to help you. And so let's get into it. I'm gonna turn it back over to Apryl. Hi, Apryl. You're over here for
Yes.
me.
And I'm just going to do a little plug for her book that just came out. It's called The Whole Self Lifestyle for Working Parents. And so excited that we got some copies. So we might be offering that in one of our door prizes for the ASC later this month or until it gets claimed. So hopefully it will go through. But, of course, we are always trying to be open to everybody's situations. And even though, Sarah is writing a book specifically for parents, this does apply to non-parents as well. And again, it's probably, as Gary said, if you can get a handle on it before having kids or without having kids, then you are a supreme master. So we're going to take a lot of Sarah's amazing goodness and knowledge. I've known her for a very long while, and we vibe on so many different levels and have so much in common in terms of the ways that, even though I think that she still has, like, she has it a little together more than I do. But there's just so much wisdom that comes in all of these conversations. So I wanted to start by kind of talking about just why we struggle with burnout in the first place. And not just why we struggle with burnout, but there's also over the years, because people are talking about it, there's all of these strategies that are available, but for some reason it doesn't seem to still be going away. So do you have any thoughts on that, Sarah, on why this
Yeah.
is not working?
Yeah.
Take us
Yeah,
back.
absolutely.
Take us back.
I have so many thoughts. Oh my gosh, where to begin? Um, So when I started doing work with working parents, I actually, my background is with couples, with teenagers, with adults. I've been doing all of this personal development, psychotherapy, coaching, project management, time management, all of the stress reduction, life management, all of these areas of my life I've worked on over the years, over 20 years or so now, and through different roles. But when I became a working mom myself was when I started realizing there's all this information out there, but none of it's helping me get my life together. I was completely burned out. I was a new mom staying at home with my son for the first couple of months of his life. And then I went back to work at a law firm in San Francisco and had a 3-hour commute, and my husband had the same commute. We were, burning the candle at both ends, like so many parents have done for many years anyway, but then COVID has just kind of turned everything inside out and upside down as well. But we, within a couple of months, had this conversation. I sort of broke down and said, all the choices that we made in our life were so intentional, and we made all of these choices deliberately. We love our life. There's so much about our life that we would never have changed until now. And now we have a baby. And before I became a working mom, I kind of just, I had all the time management experience and project management experience. I had all the parenting information and relationship information, and all of that stuff was like it was right there in my head. And I was still struggling so hard. And I talked to my husband, and we kind of decided, like, we've got to make some new choices now. I kind of thought I'd just plug my baby into my existing overwhelmed life and that I'd, in the evenings nurse him, and in the morning give him a quick cuddle before heading off to daycare. And it just obviously didn't work like that. Anybody who's a parent kind of understands, just like, I describe it in my book, like the molecular shift that happens to a person when you become a parent. And that's what I had no idea to prepare for. You couldn't have prepared for it, obviously. So as I became a working mom, I started doing my own work around, like, okay, there's all this time management information out there for professionals. Sounds great, but if I'm up 4 times a night, none of this is working for me, or a lot of self-care stuff happening, a lot of advice for parents around self-care, like, oh, just get up at 5 in the morning and meditate and write in your journal, do some exercise, have some tea, do all the things. And I was like, I'm up until 4 or 5 in the morning. Like, I can't then get up. I'm like, when am I supposed to sleep? So a lot of the information just wasn't applying to me as a working parent specifically. So I really dove into that population of people and became a specialist in why isn't all of this research and advice and all of these opinions and studies and all of this stuff that we now know about being a good parent, or about self-care, or about time management, why isn't this helping? Why is burnout getting worse? Why is it now a syndrome, according to the World Health Organization? So that's really what my work over the last 7 or 8 years now has, that's what it's been all about. But the framework that I've compiled and that I now apply to working parenthood applies to everybody, because burnout is a universal problem, right? We all have this issue. And we can kind of go into, all of the work that I've done, the things that I've figured out. But yeah, that's really been the crux of it for me, is we have all this information, but it's not helping us. Why? And the answer, bottom line answer, is that burnout is it's so complex, and we've been trying to simplify it by, it's just a time management issue, or it's just a self-care issue, or it's just a parenting issue, or something like that. We need to have conversations with our boss or whatever. And that's part of the answer. The bigger answer is that we're all so unique and we're all so different. And the issues that each of us are dealing with on a day-to-day basis are so unique and complex. And we have to take that into account before we start coming up with solutions for our situation or our problems. And that's kind of what's been bypassed, I think, in modern society. We kind of go online and we find a bunch of stuff, and we think that because it worked for someone else, it should work for us too. And then it doesn't, and we feel like failures, and on and on. So that's that's been the work that I've been doing, and sort of the reason why I think burnout is not getting better with information, but getting worse, actually.
Yeah, because it's like, oh wait, there's all this information that you can, now I just have to read it. I just have to find the time to read it, which is, in itself, like, all the emails and all the things that you get slammed. How do you decide what's, like, what you're going to make time for in any given day? And that applies to people who don't have kids too, because sure. I still feel like before I had kids, I was at work trying to be like, okay, I'm being bombarded with all these tasks. Like, what am I supposed to do first? But I need to do it all. And, the burnout started way before I had kids. It was just, I didn't realize that I was operating at this point where, like, the child basically broke the model, the well-oiled machine that I thought that I had. So, I think that part of this webinar for all of you in the ASC is why we want to talk about this is because if you are a parent, you're already kind of in the thick of it and trying to figure out how to continue to juggle and manage your own life while taking care of others. But if you are not a parent, these are really great ways to identify like what signs you might be exhibiting that might actually you might not realize is that you're leading towards burnout, and hopefully some strategies to like talk yourself off of that ledge before you like are just like about to fall off it. So yeah, there was that. And then one of the things that we also wanted to ask, let's see, in terms of the all of the resources that are available, one of the reasons why I think that these strategies won't work are a you read them, but then you need some sort of maybe accountability or some sort of you actually have to put that expertise in action, right? You can't just read it and be like it's done. But what types of other myths are there surrounding burnout that exist, and why the tactics that are out there right now aren't working?
Well, when I started this work, one of the myths I was kind of falling into, and one that I still think is universal. What I think a lot of people think is that burnout is really a function of time management or inefficiency, right? Like that if people could just manage their time better, they wouldn't feel so overwhelmed and burned out. And it's just so much deeper and more complex than that. And so when I started actually diving into it, what I found is that there are actually kind of three different levels or three different sources of burnout is kind of how I identified it. Number one is sort of the internal source of burnout. And that is the psychological stuff, the subconscious beliefs that we hold on to, the things that we probably don't even understand our beliefs in our life, but they just kind of like guide our behavior or our choices or the way we do things. And so that would include things like myths. And some of those myths that I see that are still totally universal and that I fully fell into for a long time. Number one was just, I should know how to do this already. That like as a working parent, there's, I've read all these parenting books, or, I've prepared for this, or I'm an ambitious person. And so I can figure this out. And so all I need to do is like Google some things or read a few articles or listen to some podcasts or get advice from friends. Like this should be something that while I might need to go out and get some resources, it shouldn't be this hard. Like I should be able to handle this. And I think a lot of people are not cutting themselves enough slack for a completely new experience where this isn't even something that you can master. Like being a parent isn't something you can master. Managing burnout in your life isn't something you can master. It's like our lives are totally evolving every day. We are changing as people every day. The circumstances shift and change every single day. So we're always having to respond to something. And so this feeling of like, I should be doing this better, I should be handling this better, that's really just kind of an expectation that we put on ourselves that isn't real. It's just like, that's just an external thing that we kind of have on top of the overwhelm itself. It's what some people who practice acceptance and commitment therapy called dirty feelings. Like there's the actual feeling, there's the pure real feeling, but then there's all sorts of stuff we pile up on top of it. So that's kind of one of the myths that I see. Another one that I've seen and still continue to see is just balance is impossible. And we were talking kind of before we started going live about how you look at me and you're like, you seem to have it all together. I don't know. Are you just faking it? Like, is this real? And it's hard because people think I'm lying when I say like, I actually really have a good time throughout my day. Like I love my kids. I like being around them all day. I like, homeschooling them. I love my business. My husband and I get along really well. Not that we don't fight, not that we don't all have bad days, not that I don't yell as a mom or, that things don't come up, but I have not felt that feeling of like, I'm drowning. I am in survival mode. I don't know where to turn. My head is spinning. Like I'm exhausted. I'm depleted. I'm like mean, all of those feelings that I definitely felt for the first few years of motherhood. I really haven't felt that in a long time because I've come up with a system that works for me in my life. I've kind of crafted my life in a way that really works. And so when things start to go off the rails, I can fix it. But that's a myth, is that it's just not possible. So a lot of people have just kind of like given up even hope of creating a life for themselves that doesn't include burnout and overwhelm and things like that. So those are some of the internal psychological myths, things that are happening inside our brains that are contributing to burnout that have nothing to do with the outside world, nothing to do with experiences that we're facing, nothing to do with circumstances or external demands or anything like that. It's just that's what's happening inside of us. And the other two, and you can stop me anytime, but the other two levels of burnout that I've noticed are number one are interpersonal, where we're committed to other people. And so we do actually have to, step up and help our family or manage our household or be there for our kids, be parents, like there's time and energy that goes into that sort of stuff. Or we have responsibilities to our career, to our work, to our colleagues, to our boss, to our clients, customers, things like that. So that's kind of the interpersonal level of things that could also include having a fight with a friend or having a parent who really relies on you for a lot of things and you don't feel like you can set boundaries and say, no, I cannot help you with that right now because I'm burnout. Those interpersonal dynamics really affect burnout. And then the third one is structural, it's cultural, it's things like discrimination or things like our hyper focus on productivity these days in our culture, in our society, or things like just numbing out when we feel like we need to recharge, but that numbing out doesn't really recharge us. Instead, what we're looking for is something to fulfill us or to fill us up. We're kind of used to let's just zone out and watch a movie, or let's binge on TV and Netflix, or let's scroll through social media, things like that. So there's all sorts of different structural, societal things that are contributing to our burnout as well. And those things are really hard to change on our own as well. So we have to find a way to either manage them or navigate them or neutralize them as much as we can. But those are all of those levels are happening all at once. It's not like you only have one source of that burnout. It's all happening. It's all dynamic. It's all changing all the time. And even just kind of wrapping our arms around what our own unique combination of those things are for ourselves can be really overwhelming and hard. And so a lot of people are just like, forget it. I'm just going to power through my day. I don't have time to even analyze all that stuff. I'm just going to get through my day and then start over tomorrow. And they get trapped in this perpetual cycle of burnout.
Whoa. Are you
Any
spying on me?
questions?
Well, Sarah Argenal, like, are you living in my house right now? I just could you no just seriously,
It's
but no,
universal.
seriously.
Like it is
Yeah.
just so like I see hundreds of comments a day on social media around this sort of stuff. And I've had conversations with working parents. I've experienced it myself. Like it's just, I think this is just where we're at in our society. And I wrote in my introduction in my book, I think COVID might, while it has so many negative and hard things associated with it, this might be one of the kind of little silver linings is that we can take a beat and think through, okay, let me breathe for a second. I don't have to take my kids to 12 different activities during the week, or I don't have, it's like, I don't have to commute right now, or things like that. There might be some relief in some areas of our life, and we can take that opportunity to think, okay, what is stressing me out right now? Let me actually take a look at this and then see if I want to make some changes or adjust some things in my life to make things easier. So if we take that opportunity, it can be a good one, but that's kind of up to everybody.
I love it. So switching gears, you had mentioned that this is very personal, and I'm curious on if you have any maybe some signals that people can tell, like, hey, I'm on the path to burnout, so that you can identify that before you're knee deep.
Yeah, well, so the World Health Organization just in 2019, they identified work-related burnout as a syndrome or a phenomenon, which basically means it's something that healthcare providers should take a look at as a source of other ailments that they're suffering with. So a couple of those red flags, a couple of the symptoms that show up in order to be diagnosed with that would be things like a feeling of exhaustion or depletion. I mean, so many people I think feel that just nonstop right now.
Yeah.
But also just kind of like a disconnection or distancing from the work that they're doing. And remember, this is all work-related burnout. There's parental burnout. There's other kinds of burnout as well. But in terms of work-related burnout, it's like, I'm not really here. I'm doing the things I need to do. I'm on autopilot sort of, or sleepwalking through my life, but like just kind of frantic and fire drills and all of that stuff. So there's that piece of it. And then there's sort of a disinterestedness in your life and just kind of like, that feeling of just like apathy or, I'm not super into this right now. I'm just getting through it. So there are a few symptoms like that that they specifically identify, and that healthcare providers will look at. But I was like, in my book, I kind of go through, like, there were a lot of red flags for me as a working mom, and just as a person in general, even before I became a mom, that were actual burnout. They were, if not on the road to burnout, that was what was telling me I was suffering, I was struggling. And that again is really complex. Like, there were things that were relational, like I was fighting a lot with my husband or my friends or my family or my coworkers. I was really impatient and resentful about the work that I was taking on, feeling like they weren't pulling their weight, that kind of thing. There were other things that, like, emotional, like it's like tearfulness, or really like I can't handle like the smallest little minor things. They throw me into a rage, or I just start crying and I'm like, I don't know what to do right now. Just like I can't manage my or regulate my emotions. Things like anxiety, like mental anxiety, like not being able to sleep at night because I just like, oh my God, all the things I've got to do and all the things I've got to plan for. And oh my, I forgot about this and I should put that on a list. And oh, can't forget about that thing. Like, just kind of my head constantly running and not being able to stop it. Things like physical health, like eating too much or not having an appetite at all. So all of these things are symptoms and signs of burnout. And what's interesting to me is that I think our culture in general, again, that hyper focus on productivity, we have so much of that already happening. It's just kind of the way we live our life right now. And so it's really hard to distinguish these as signs of burnout. And I think as a society, so many of us really are burned out and aren't even understanding that that's what it is. We think this is just what it is to be a parent, or to be a professional, or to be somebody who has this high powered career or is trying to build a business or whatever. Like, we kind of place this assumption that this is just what it's supposed to be, but that's not true. We are not, as humans, supposed to be revving at this level all the time. And right now, on top of all of the normal sources of burnout, we also have COVID and perhaps homelessness or losing a job or somebody in our family getting sick. Like, we have all of these extra external stressors on top of us as well. So we're really truly like living through this kind of global chronic episode of stress, an episode of burnout and trauma. And we're really not through it yet. We're still right in the middle of it as we're recording right now. So it's like, I think it's important to identify those things for ourselves and to be okay with that, and not to try to like positive think it away, and not to like reframe it and be like, it's bad, but it can be, we're fine. At least we have this. It's like, it's okay to acknowledge the hard things in our life, because until we do, we can't start to address them appropriately.
Yeah. I love what you were
Yes.
saying about just, the fact that like we're probably as a society like all burned out. Um I mean, and even
Well,
there's times where
there's
yeah.
research that says that we are. All of the rates of anxiety, depression, suicide, bullying, like all of these things are skyrocketing over the last 10 years or so. And there's a direct correlation to a lot of the expectations that we place on ourselves in society as well. So yeah, I mean, this isn't just hey, it seems like we're burned out. No, we're burned out. It's getting worse. It's starting to be recognized, and we haven't found the way out of it yet. We're kind of like right in the beginning stages of figuring our way through it.
Yeah.
One thing, real quick, before we switch to the next um, question is when you were talking about that, of like all the other things that sort of pile up, it reminds me of a study that I read recently. I think it was Jen Graydon and Michael Eisnick, and they were talking about that all of that secondary thoughts of things that's going on, it takes up cognitive resources, which depletes you from actually living life. And
Yeah.
so, it's just one of those sort of validations of like, if you're going through a lot and it seems like, and it's like the perfect storm where we have this belief like, oh, I should just be able to figure this out. Like,
This
hello.
doesn't seem
And
hard.
then,
Right.
yeah, right, like, and then you feel broken, like, why am I not figuring this out, and not realizing there's all these other things that are going on. So yeah, oh my gosh, so thank you
Well,
for that.
there's
That's
two things there that are kind of important. Number one is context switching is one thing that depletes our brain energy. And that's going from that's quote multitasking, right? Going from one activity to another, or thinking about one thing and then another. Like, we're not streamlining our energy and our thoughts. So especially now, again, I think a lot of parents especially, but I think anybody who's dealing with COVID right now, like, you're going from your boss to doing the laundry to washing dishes to handling a kid to making lunch. Like, you're kind of flip-flopping all over the place. It's not like you're streamlining your thoughts and you can't like ride a wave of momentum in your brain. You kind of just bebop all over the place, and every time you switch from one activity to another, you kind of utilize extra energy to get back on track and okay, let me start thinking about this again. So that's context switching. The other one is decision fatigue. And I know we're all going through a lot of that right now too. And these are just kind of like invisible sources of depletion and energy, like where we're using resources that we are not even aware that we're using. And so having to decide things like, should I put my kid in school, or should I keep them at home? Should I take them out completely, put them in homeschool? Should I quit my job? Should I switch jobs? Should I work harder? Should I set this boundary? Should I not set that boundary? Can I ask my spouse to take care of this household item, or is that going to cause a fight? I don't know. He's super, it's like all of these things are constantly running through our heads. And yeah, of course we're burned out. Of course we're having a hard time right now. I really want to like validate that for people, because no one should be doing anything perfectly right now. Getting through it is kind of just where we're at. When you are in the middle of a trauma, it really is like you're in survival mode. So sometimes it's not even appropriate to expect yourself to not be in survival mode. It's just like, I just got to manage this as best I can and give myself a lot of grace. And I think, it's hard to do that sometimes. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to not do that.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because like, I think, quietly, all of us, even though, we want to work hard and we want, to like feel the success of all of our hard work and all that stuff, there's that piece of us that like, really, if we were given the opportunity to like, just like wipe our to-do list clean and like not have anything to do on a given day, just to like rest and just be like, everything is gonna, like, the whole world is gonna pause and you get 24 hours or however long, like, everyone would jump at that and be like, I can do whatever I want, and like nobody's depending on anything, and like there's nothing that is like is time sensitive in that 24 hours. Like the world stops and I can do what I want. Like we would all jump at that opportunity, right? And why do we wouldn't? To just like have like the freedom to do whatever you want, and like the work
I think most people would want to, but it would drive them insane to be like, what? I should be doing, like, the guilt.
Yeah. Well, I think part of what you're seeing right now is that that's what's happening with COVID, is like, I don't have all my distractions. What? Like, and they're sitting with their thoughts or their feelings or the circumstances of their lives that maybe they're like, I probably need to fix this. This isn't working for me, but I don't want to deal with it. And busy, go. Like having that kind of lifestyle is handy for avoiding deeper issues. And some people I think are kind of stuck at home and they're like, I don't have like this ability to go out with my friends and kind of, or to take my kids to all these activities, or to shuttle my teenagers around to all of these parties, or, it's like or even just like, I have all this work I have to do, or I have all these errands I have to run. It's just like, I think our society again has been able to pile up so many of those types of distractions, and that can be comforting because you're able to totally disconnect from the deeper, more meaningful things that actually create happiness in our lives. And it seems on the surface like that stuff is more manageable. Like you were saying, like, it's nice to just like check off a bunch of stuff. Like, okay, here's my to-do list and I'm just getting through it, and I got to go through it, and I got to hurry, and I get to the end of the day. Okay, it's time to watch a show and go to bed, and now I start all over tomorrow. Like being in that rat race can sometimes feel comforting to people. And then, when we're asked to pause without our own choice, like without saying to ourselves, I'm intentionally going to pause and like be here with myself. Like if it's not a choice, I think it can be really distressing to people, if they're not prepared for the quiet. And I don't think we as a society, again, have been used to the quiet that now we're sort of being forced to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that, yes, I totally agree that we are so wired to be like, we have to have something to do. But I do feel that if we were given the opportunity to say like, hey, there would be no consequences. Like you could just like take a break from life for 24 hours. Nothing would pile up. Nothing would happen while you were gone. Like people would jump at that chance to just like kind of sit and I don't know, maybe sleep.
Yeah.
And,
well, that's a vacation, right? Like that's what we do on vacation, is like, I'm checking out. I am gonna go have fun. I'm gonna do whatever I want. I'm gonna be in the moment. Like that's,
except stuff piles up.
It does.
Sometimes, if you choose
the world
to.
keeps turning.
Right? Yeah, I'm curious, like for you watching, whether you're the few people that are watching live or you're watching the replay, if you did get the chance, like how would you feel? How would that make you feel
Yeah, does it give you anxiety or hope and excitement?
Right? Exactly. Because you're right. Like we should be like, oh my gosh. Because
Sounds
just
so
take a
nice.
moment. Like when we were kids, and it was like the end of the school year, and you're like, oh, like summer vacations coming up, and if you think about like when we were kids, a lot of times we didn't have a lot of plans. Maybe there was a vacation or some sort of trip, but it's mostly just like,
Go ride your bike, go
Playing
outside and
games,
play. Yeah,
right?
like
outside.
yeah, figure it
We were
out. Spend
excited.
all
Like we were
day.
excited, and the boredom. So this is like I love that you bring this up. Like the boredom is where like magic happens.
Mhm.
Like you get bored, and then your brain's like, oh, I need to figure out something to do. But yet we won't allow ourselves to get to that point because Sarah, you bring up a good point about like, man, there's some of that baggage that needs to be dealt with, and I would rather just be busy because I have an excuse not to deal with it than
Mhm. It depends. Yeah, I think that probably even day to day, different people might have a different response to that question. You know, like today, I'd love a break. Man, I am exhausted and overwhelmed, and I have too much going on, and I just want to shut it all out. And then there are other people. I think to me, it seems like the longer we're all kind of in quarantine, you know, I'm down here in Texas where we're still like, we're still struggling a little bit. And so people are just like, this seems like it's going to drag on forever. And it's creating a lot of anxiety around like, I need to be able to go do my things. Like, I got to get out of here. I can't just sit here all day, every day with my thoughts. And even if I have a job or I have kids or, you know, other things that are on my plate, I have more time than I had before. And I have more time to think and I have more time to evaluate. And I don't like it. I don't want it. I'm going to just then now go zone out. Or, you know, I think it is harder than we give it credit for, I think, sometimes to sort of open ourselves to that quiet and that calm. And I think we're just not used to it. Like you were saying, I think we as a society were used to it maybe when we were kids. And now we always have an option to be distracted. And a lot of us will take it if we feel like we need it.
yeah. In the comments, Mac, sorry, not Mac, Mike, forgive me, Mike. He said it will give him relief and hope if he's
Okay.
like if he got a pass, just a pass to be like, all right, cool. So I love that.
I
Thank
would,
you, Mike.
I would like just, I don't know. I probably would just lay there and not move for 20, like if it was whatever time
What
period.
if it was for 3 months? How would you feel
That is a
about
long time.
checking out
That's
for
too.
3 months? Yeah, it's kind of like the ongoing nature of like purposelessness, you know, or whatever.
Right.
That
Yeah.
seems to be like no, I need something
Yeah.
to
Because
like
then you'd be like,
drive
but
me
I want to
forward.
make stuff on my list to do, you know? Like, I wonder if I would just be like, okay, then I'm going to just get through all of the emails that I keep on like postponing till later to read when I should just delete them. I can't let go. So this is a great segue into just talking about some actual strategies, right? Like we're not going to sit here and talk about how great it would be to not be overwhelmed and to, you know, defeat burnout without having strategies, but strategies that work, not just the ones where it's like, okay, here's what you're going to do. And Sarah, since you wrote this book and you are like the guru on burnout, I would love for you to share with everyone this whole self lifestyle, um, and how that actually works and how it, um, basically gives people an alternative way to live that won't put you on the path to burnout.
Yeah, so the whole self lifestyle is kind of how I've stopped thinking about work life balance or work life integration. I mean, that's been the kind of the big conversation over the last 10 or 20 years or so when it comes to burnout or, you know, like making you feel like you are doing things well in your life and enjoying your life. And I came up with this phrase that I have started using in my life, and now I, you know, have applied this to all the work that I do, not only with working parents but other people as well. And it's called the whole self lifestyle. And really, the three pieces of that is number one, we're whole human beings. And I think for a long time, we were able to sort of segregate the different parts of ourselves into little silos. Like when we were at home, we were the husband or the wife or the mom or the dad, and we could kind of be at home and put that hat on and just be there, and work didn't really come into it. And then when, you know, we'd head off to work, we'd put on our work hat, and then we'd be at work and we'd be the professional and we'd be able to handle our needs, you know, our customers needs, our clients needs, bosses needs, whatever. And our family didn't really come into our lives. And so I think that's where this whole work life balance thing came from, is like, okay, you know, if it's pretty equally distributed between the two, you feel pretty good, okay, things are cool. And that's just sort of an outdated model or an outdated, you know, way to think about it right now. I think I think of our lives as kind of this holistic ecosystem of many, many, many different roles that we play in our lives. We're sisters, we're brothers, we're moms, dads, aunts, uncles, friends, business professionals, whether that's working in a corporate environment, building your own business, maybe you're volunteering full-time, maybe you're a student, maybe you're a runner, maybe you're an artist, maybe, you know, it's like we have like, I mean, dozens, if not hundreds of different aspects to who we are. And when we only think of ourselves in terms of work or family, you know, or work or life, it can be too binary. And so this concept of whole self lifestyle is kind of this, let's start integrating all pieces of who we are in everything that we do. If we're a mom, we can bring that to work, you know, or if we're an artist, we can bring that to our parenting. You know, there's all sorts of different combinations of that, and you can just show up as yourself, as a whole self. The second piece is when I started doing this work, one of the other issues that I found people were struggling with who dealt with burnout or who were struggling with burnout was that there's so much information out there, you know, quote, out there from external sources, that it was really hard to remember who they were inside. You know, like, who am I? What's my identity? What drives me? What makes me excited? What works for me? Who am, you know, like, what are my weaknesses? What are my strengths? What are my goals? What are my needs? All of that stuff comes into play when you're evaluating all of this information out there. And it's infinite. You know, we have access to all the information we could ever handle. We can't get through it all at this point. And so instead of just like taking it in and trying to keep it all in our brain and apply it the way we would maybe in school, you know, this is not the world that we live in anymore. And so we kind of need a filter for navigating all of the information or advice or opinions that, you know, our friends or family members give us. And this concept of self and kind of your whole self, understanding who you are while you're evaluating this information, can be a really helpful tool. Because if you understand who you are on a really deep level, if you are very, very clear about who you are, a lot of that outside noise kind of falls away, and the important pieces of information can be really helpful. So that's kind of the whole self piece of it. And then the lifestyle pieces that I also noticed that a lot of people are out there going like, I'm too burned out and I'm too overwhelmed and I'm too tired and I need a solution right this second. I need instant gratification. I need this to happen now. And they're kind of thinking about the quick fix versus a lifestyle. You know, they're trying to implement one golden nugget in their life that's going to make all the pain go away. But this is really, as we all know, this is an ongoing practice. You know, this is something that we have to cultivate in our lives kind of in every moment. It's kind of always shifting and changing. We have to reevaluate what's working and what's not. What do I change? What do I focus on? Where do I put my time? All of those questions come up every day for us. And we have to learn how to make decisions that are going to work for each of us. And so kind of putting those three pieces together is when, if you're able to do those things better than not, you know, throughout the day, you're going to feel a lot more content. You're going to feel like your life is a little more meaningful. Your relationships are going to be a little bit more solid. You know, your work is going to feel more fulfilling. All of that stuff that we all kind of want, you know, when we talk about work-life balance or whatever, this is sort of an alternative to it, just a more dynamic and more holistic way of looking at who we are, how are we going through our lives, and how do we make sense of all of this information and all of this advice that's coming at us all the time, not to mention like demands on our time or expectations. All of that stuff is always coming at us. So how do we filter through it? So that's kind of the philosophy that I have come up with and that I describe in this book, and that I help working parents in particular. That's who I work with right now. That's just my specialty, but it works with anybody in life. It's really just so unique and so personal that everybody can kind of go through this process on their own. So that's the philosophy of it. And then I have a 4-step framework that helps people actually put that into practice. And so I'll stop here before I dive into all of that. But
do we have any questions before we? I don't. If anybody in the that's watching live, if you guys have questions, feel free. We'll take them at the next break. I should have probably said that beforehand. But like, Gary, what do you think about this?
I love it, and one of the things that I love that you mentioned, Sarah, is just honoring who you are, and bringing it, you know, integrating that into all areas of your life. Because when you were talking about earlier about the context switching, I feel like that's similar to, and maybe because of COVID, it's all being sort of put down in one. But I feel like, you know, you go home. And then you have to put on the mom hat or the dad hat, and you go to work. You have to put on my professional hat, and like all of those parts of you, like stay separate. And like I love this sort of parts integration where it's like, all right, look, this is the whole self, and you have permission to incorporate that into all areas of your life. And I feel like doing that sounds very freeing. So thank you for that permission. I appreciate that.
And I'm not like, that's the thing. I don't think it's me that gives anybody permission. I think we each have to sort of claim that power for ourselves and realize the world used to be like, I have worked in law firms for 20 years, and it's like there's a certain culture, there's a certain professional vibe there where it's like, oh, you don't have children, you don't have a personal life, you don't have other priorities, you are the work, that is what you are here to do, and I don't want to hear anything else about anything else. And so it can be really difficult, I think, to claim that for ourselves and say, like, actually, no, I am a parent and I do love to, walk my dog, and I do like to go on vacations to beach towns, or, whatever. Like, there are so many parts of each of us that really contribute to who we are. And I think it's up to each and every one of us to reclaim that power and to reclaim and be like, this is who I am. And then to choose to be in situations where that's acceptable. There are, I think, still places out there where it's not acceptable. And then we kind of have to make a choice. Like, I'm either going to have to give up my whole self. Like, I'm going to have to give up all these aspects of who I am in order to fit here. Or I need to stand up for myself and say, hey, actually bringing my whole self to this role is going to be much better for everybody. Like, I'm going to be less stressed out and be able to perform better, obviously, but it's just a richer experience. If we were all doing this, where we were all able to show up to every role we had or to every experience or circumstance that we're in and just say, this is who I am. And I'm so solid about that. And I feel really good about that. And I'm always learning and changing and growing, but right now, here's who I am. And this is what I'm presenting to you as a whole version of myself, not just like this one teeny aspect that you've accepted, like it's a whole different way to think about interacting in society. And the people who've been able to do that have better work dynamics. They're more productive. They're happier. They're getting better business results. Like, all the things that we all say, like, this is what we want. And we think it's, a few hours of self-care a week or time management or whatever. It's like, those are pieces of it. That's one tiny tactic. But really, this is the bottom line, is I think we all need to learn how to show up as ourselves. We have to understand what that is first, and then be willing and vulnerable enough to go out into the world and sort of express that. And that can be scary in this stage. It's like, I think people are opening to it more, but it's different. It's not what people have normally done over history. This is a very different way to live. So it's a risk in some ways.
Yeah. I feel like COVID, one of the beauties of this environment is that now we are getting a glimpse into people's personal lives, and it's integrating. And I see so many of those. I know, right? Yeah.
Not because we wanted to.
Not because we wanted to. It's like, it is what it is. But like, people saying like, oh, because in the beginning, right? Like, you have video calls and everyone's like,
kids, just close the door.
And then now, like, because it's still going on, it's like, the kid sort of pops in and people are like, oh, look at you, and it's just becoming like acceptable. But I don't think, like, it took a global pandemic for people to be like,
humanize us.
Yes.
Right.
Well, it's so funny because I wrote this book before COVID. I started it last summer, and it was going to the proofreader when COVID started, and I didn't know how long that would be going on. So I wrote the intro for it. But when I wrote the book, my biggest struggle with, when I was working with working parents, was getting them to believe that should happen. And to do it one person at a time is one thing. To do it on a global scale, it's like, well, okay, we're all in this boat together. I guess we're moving forward. I guess we're changing things, And so it's actually easier now, because I'm like, well, I guess that argument's done. We're working from home now. We have flexible remote work schedules and things like that. Like, so many of the obstacles are being removed by force almost. And so now it's like, okay, are we going to adapt to this? Are we going to try and like rush right back to normal, quote unquote, which wasn't really making people all that happy, So where do we go from here is a good question. We're not, we're still right in the messy middle of it all, but yeah, it's helpful, I think.
Totally. All right. So now I want to hear all of these 4 steps. And what I love about your framework is it aligns with, many of the things that I have said about, balance as a whole, right? Like, a lot of it has to be defined by you. And if you let external factors define it for you, then is that going to be your true happy state, or is it something for now? And not to say that any way you decide to go is wrong, but you have to feel good about it. So if you are a working professional who's watching this and not a parent, and you have you want your life to be work, and it's the thing that you're most passionate about, and you want to wake up and spend 18 hours of your day at work, and then come back and maybe socialize for a little bit or whatever, then that's totally
That's
fine.
balance.
It's
Yeah, that's
that's
good.
balance for you, and there's no judgment. But then there are, as you were saying, there are places where culturally, if you are someone who has a family, or you have obligations or passions or desires, there's a lot of people in this community that are multi-potentialites who love to do a whole bunch of things, and to have to compartmentalize all of the variety of things that you're interested in and not be able to integrate them is very hard to move forward and
It's actually
actually
more work. Yeah.
is more work. Which is why you'll see me in the work that I do. I'm like, okay, I'm taking ukulele lessons, but how can I use this for work? How can I do this? Like I was just on a podcast yesterday, like, can you play something on the spot? And I was like, oh no, oh yes. But it's, it's part of the work, is showing people that the leisure stuff can be integrated into the work that you're doing. Maybe not if you're an accountant and you don't bring your ukulele, or maybe you do it at a lunch break, but there's different ways to integrate. So anyways, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to hear these amazing 4 steps to integrating this whole self lifestyle.
Yeah. So I came up with the philosophy, and it's like, hey, this is maybe a different way to think about it all, and how we operate our lives. But it's just a philosophy. And, as we all know, like, okay, great idea. How do I make that happen? So I have a 4-step system, and you can use the acronym SELF, SELF, to remember what the 4 steps are. And so the first step is a system inventory. And that is, if we think of our lives and our experience here on Earth as a system, as an ecosystem, we have all of these different things that are not just like, you're not just that thing about balance. It's like, it's a fallacy anyway to believe that we actually can compartmentalize completely. Like, when we make a change in our marriage, that's going to impact our work. If we're going through a divorce, we're going to be less productive at work. It does impact it, whether we want it to or not. If we just dropped our baby off at daycare for the very first time, that's going to impact how well we're able to focus at work, or it might impact our marriage, or it might impact how much time we have available for friends or for leisure activities or whatever. Like, every aspect of who we are and of our lives is an ecosystem. It is impacted by all of the others. So it's not only important to make sure that kind of all of the different areas of our lives are operating as well as possible, like our mental health, our physical health, our careers, our relationships, our parenting, all of that stuff. If you think about each of them independently, yeah, we want them to be working really well, but we also kind of have to keep a broader focus on how are they integrating and happening and impacting each other as well. So the system inventory is really getting data about where we are today, right now, about our lives, right? Because 6 months ago, our lives all looked really different, right? And if I had asked you, what's their biggest stressor? What are you dealing with? What area of your life would you like to improve? Like, all of that stuff, you'd probably have very different answers. And so as we grow and change, it's really important to get a really clear understanding about what we're really dealing with today in this reality. And so the system inventory is really about going through each of the different areas of your life, kind of like a life wheel. If, for those of you who are either been coached or been in therapy, things like that, just kind of like mental health, physical health and wellness, career and purpose, family, relationships, social time, leisure activities, all of those different things are parts of our life, parts of who we are. So get an understanding of what is happening in each of those lives. And you're just gathering data at that point, just observing. You're not making judgment calls on any of it. You're just kind of getting the data down on paper. And so I have a bunch of questions I ask people, but it really is something you can kind of even just kind of look through and be like, okay, yep, all of these, I'm, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm feeling really good about this one and not so good about that one, or vice versa. So you can get an idea of where you are. That's system inventory, step 1. Step 2 is E for evaluate. And that is where then you can go into each of these areas and be like, whoa, I am on a 3 on physical health, man. Like, I am not sleeping. I am eating poorly. I'm not exercising. I'm drinking a lot, whatever. But I'm like at a 10 on work. I am like killing it there. And everybody thinks I'm great at work, but then my relationships that are like a 4, like where you can kind of look at all of the different areas of your life and be like, where am I doing well? What feels really good for me right now? And what areas are like falling short? What areas do I really feel like they need to be improved because my life experience is not good right now? I don't like these parts of my life. So you kind of evaluate which parts you would want to focus on if you were going to, focus your energy on fixing something in your life. But the other piece of that too is really understanding, like, okay, if you're going to focus on things like mental health, how is that going to impact the other areas of your life? That would probably be helpful, right? Or, hey, if I'm going to start working out, or if I'm going to start working on my physical health, how is that going to impact all of the other areas of my life? Some people too, like, sort of misunderstand why they aren't happy in areas of their life. So things like, God, household management, I'm really falling short. I cannot get all my dishes done at night. Beds are never made. Kids' rooms always a mess. Like, I'm just falling short. I feel like it's a total disaster. Maybe that's a relationship issue where you need to communicate with your partner about a division of labor. Or maybe that's a boss issue where you're like, I've taken on way too much and I don't have time to handle the other pieces of my life. So it's like, it can kind of be sneaky. And so I kind of help people in that step too, like really evaluate, not just like, oh, what do I like? What don't I like? But like, go deep. Which things would you really need to change? What's that, underneath part of the sea for the iceberg? We're seeing the top part of the iceberg, but there's a lot of stuff underneath that could probably be evaluated too. So the third stage, after you've kind of done that deep dive analysis, the third step is list of solutions. And for that step, what we do is then we have an idea of like, okay, I'm going to focus on improving this part of my life, or maybe one or two parts of my life, 3 parts. And so in order to do that, I need to get some information. I need to decide what I'm going to do to improve that part of my life. And that's where it can be helpful. Now that we have this filter, we can target our search for, okay, it'd be really helpful to get information about how to communicate with my partner about a division of labor. Or it might be really helpful to get some sort of tool so that we can really like see all the different things that are required and who's handling what right now, and see if we maybe need to like move some of those things around. But so for list of solutions is really like gathering information and coming up with, and this is the key, a list of action steps that you can take, like actual behaviors that you can implement in your life that you can actually do, and actually breaking them down into like very, very small achievable chunks, like little things that you could actually do, like kind of those micro habits that you might have heard about out there. But brainstorm a whole list, come up with as many ideas as you can think of so that you kind of have this master list of things to choose from. And then you kind of commit to 1 or 2 or 3 things that you can try for a couple of weeks, or, for a period of time before you decide whether it works or not. And then so that fourth step is the implementation phase. And this is what you were talking about earlier, April, where it's like we actually have to do stuff in order to change our lives. Mm-hmm. We can't just like read all this information or take in all this advice or whatever. We actually have to implement it. So this fourth step is called familiarize. And that's where we not only try it, but we figure out whether it's working for us. And if it is, we find a way to integrate it into our lives, to familiarize ourselves with that behavior. If it's not working for us, we can let it go without this like fear of missing out, or this fear of failure, or second guessing ourselves, or trying to decide, oh, maybe I should try it harder. And, maybe I just need to give it a longer period of time or whatever. If it's not working for us, it's cool, because we've got our whole master list from step 3. We can try something else. So we don't have to feel guilty for not doing something that seems like everybody else is doing it. So why isn't it working for me? We can really get some real data about what's working in our own lives, and get rid of the stuff that's not working and try something new if it's not working. Or if it is working, then make that a part of your life. Make it something that sticks for over the long term, and isn't just one of those like, oh, it worked for a week or 2 and then life got busy and I totally stopped doing it, which is often what happens. So those are kind of the 4 steps in a quick nutshell. And what that helps people do is like, it gives you a filter for what information is out there for me, and you can leverage that information rather than having it control you. And like, instead of all of this advice and all this information out there being like, oh, I've got to do all of those things in order to be a happy, healthy person, we get to choose and pick and choose the things that are going to work for us in this moment of our lives. And this is meant to be repeated over time. So when you're feeling burned out again, or you kind of get that sneaky suspicion you're like on the path to burnout, you can try it again and be like, okay, let's get another fresh system inventory going. Let's get a snapshot of what's happening right now, and how do I go through these steps again to keep clearing out the things that aren't working, and continue to refine and continue to improve my life in all these different ways. And it'll change over time, as our lives change, and as we change, what is needed will be changed as well.
Absolutely. I love that. Sense? Yeah, that
Yeah.
totally is amazing. And, I think that, there is this piece of consistency that needs to be implemented as you're doing this going through these 4 steps, right? Because as you start to take inventory, when you get to a place where you're a little bit more sustainable, right? Because if you're starting at the bottom where you're like, my life is a mess, I need to do some cleanup, you won't be able to, if you take inventory and there's like 5 different things that need to be addressed, you're not going to be able to just like turn them around within a month or even overnight all at the same time. You need to introduce new solutions into your life. So it's like kind of between that step 3 and 4, it's like take your time with it, right? It's like figure out
Lifestyle.
what is
This is not a quick fix.
And then let yourself like balance out or like calibrate, because I think what I would tend to do sometimes early on is I would be like, okay, I need to change all of this stuff. I'm going to do this entire plan. And then I'm working on this, and then I'm working on this, and then I'm working on something else. And it's like my 4 limbs are like all working on 4 different things. And then I'm still tired. And sometimes there are certain projects that you'll take on to try to implement in your life that might need sole focus. Right? Like, I probably shouldn't have written a book and tried to grow my business and had like kids under, like starting first grade and kindergarten. Like, I shouldn't have done that all at the same time. And why I ended up feeling burned out, even though I was doing all stuff that I wanted to do. But you have to introduce new things. And once you find something that seems to work, then you can start to shift to the next issue and say, how can I clean this up? But then also noticing that if you introduce something, how does it impact, what you have as your baseline? And does it impact your baseline in a way where you want to change the baseline? Or do you want to change and switch to another solution? And I think that people don't have necessarily the patience to want to be like, because they want the quick fix, right? They want
is that
what's
working
work.
Like we've been trying that. It's not. Is it working? If it's working, keep it up. If you're somebody who can try to change 45 things in your life at once and it works, awesome. And some people do. Some people are like, my life is falling apart. In San Francisco, I'm moving to San Diego, and we weren't impulsive about that, but that was our situation. We're like, what? Doing this will change 5 pretty core things. Like, we'll eliminate our commute, we'll have more time with our kids, money won't be as big an issue. It's just like it eliminated some pretty big factors in our stress. And so there are ways to do that too. But yeah, I mean, in general, our systems tend to feel shocked if we try to do too much at once, and then we revert back to what's familiar. We revert back to what's comfortable. And so just doing one tiny little micro change at a time, it improves how we feel on a, it's like, it's a gradual improvement. It's not like an overall, like, complete transformation overnight. Never possible. That's probably not going to happen. But if we can do 1 or 2 little things, you build that momentum, and things get a little easier and a little easier and a little easier, and you can kind of keep growing and building on that. And over time, you're like, okay, things are like quite manageable. And now I can introduce some, things that might throw things off. Oh, nope, that's throwing things off too much. I'm going to put that back over there. But it's constant, like, making choices and like keeping in touch and keeping a pulse on, like, how is this impacting me? How am I doing well? Is this working? Or is this just adding more stress? Or is this not working for me? And I feel like I should be doing it because other people are doing it, or, whatever. But yeah, it's a total personal process, and it's an ongoing, long-term, lifelong process. It's not something to be done overnight.
For sure.
What I love about this, and I love that you mentioned, the whole sort of micro habits. It reminds me, I read the book Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, and I feel like you mix that with this, and like, oh, it's like home run, because you mentioned it in the beginning. This is not a quick fix. And the cool thing that I love about like the whole tiny habits is that it's so small and micro that you get that immediate gratification. Like, hey, I'm doing something. But over time, it starts to integrate into your system and it becomes who you are. Whereas I feel like there's a lot of, in our current culture, we celebrate the people like the David Goggins who can like identify like, I'm going to change my whole life, strip everything, I'm doing this. And that works, in my opinion, for a small percentage of the population.
Or it might work in certain parts of your life too.
Yeah.
It's like when you have a new baby, wow, everything's changed anyway. So go ahead, start making some changes. Like, it's okay to introduce some new habits or routines or systems or whatever. Like, but you know, and when I was 25, like you can do that kind of thing. And then it's like, right now, maybe I don't want to have that big, intense, crazy change that to adapt to. Like little tiny moments of change might be the better way to go. Like you get to make these choices. That's the beauty of it. Each person gets to kind of build their own adventure kind of thing.
Yeah. And I'm the play guy, so like when you were talking about experiment, that's like play till its fullest of like, oh, we're just gonna play with this. And like I was, as you were talking about it, I was like imagining going on a quest where it's like, oh, we have like all of our like sort of wheel and like, oh, guess what? I got 2 points in charisma because I was working on this, and that helps me with this, this, and this. So like I feel like all of these things, because it's the whole self, as you start
You're
to layer
improving
them
all
on.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you might think like my career, man, is in the dumps. I got to fix it. And when I go through and kind of help people figure out what are you going to focus your time and energy on, there are questions around like, okay, let's look at what is the thing, like are there things that like you need to fix this or you cannot continue, you know, like this is so like you're going through a divorce or you know somebody is ill in your family or something, like you need to focus your time and energy on that just to get through this period. Like there could be that, but there also could be, hey, if I do this thing over here, it's really going to impact like 6 other areas of my life or all the areas of my life. Like mental health is a big one or physical health is a big one, you know, like if I change jobs, that could really have a good impact on a lot of other things in my life. Or if I, you know, like it's like this puzzle piece that, you know, you keep moving all these pieces around constantly to fit for you, you know, and to fit in this moment in your life, this season in your life. And you can also make different choices too in the future. Like, oh, my kids are now in high school, I can make totally different choices than I did when they were 2. You know, like there's a lot of flexibility and total freedom, but there's, you know, there are some guidelines to help you kind of go through these 4 steps in this order so that you're not just kind of like, I have so many options and there's so much freedom, I don't know what to do first, where do I begin? Okay, I'll try that thing over there, or I read this book over here and they told me to do that, so I'll do that. You know, it's just like we're being so guided by these experts that are out there right now. We're kind of forgetting to start with our insides, with who we are and what we want. And so this kind of does that. It flips our lives from the outside in to be the inside out.
Yay.
I know we are coming up on just finishing, or we're already over, but I think that we want to start to close out and just say, Sarah, thank you so much for all of this wisdom. We like to kind of close out with just kind of like a final thoughts, but I want to do this one in a way where we kind of thinking about COVID and knowing that this is coming at a time where a lot of families are starting school, so this is a special bonus for parents. How, you know, do you have any tips or tricks? And I know that you homeschool your parents, and Gary doesn't have kids that are in school just yet, and I have kids who are actually going into school on a hybrid basis. But as we start to think about, you know, we're going into this thing again where, you know, summer was kind of like we had a little bit more freedom because we could choose to take vacations and the kids didn't have a structure or schedule. And we know a little bit more about COVID now, but do you have, and I guess we could do it from all 3 of our perspectives, just like one really quick tip on how to help you navigate the coming months of more uncertainty, and just kind of juggling this thing and trying to prevent burnout as much as possible. What would your little nugget of advice be?
You want me to go first?
Sure.
I think for me, I've had so many conversations with so many different people, and everybody I know is kind of doing something a little different, going back to school, doing hybrid, doing virtual distance learning, doing homeschool. Like there's all the different variations, and every family is going to look a little different. Different people have different parents working or whatever. And what I feel like has been most helpful is try to focus and sort of along the lines of what we've been talking about, focus on your own experience and like what you're going through, what your kids are experiencing today and right now and this week. Like, are they adjusting well? And how can you support them and their mental health? How can you support your own mental health and your family's relationships? You know, like how can you prioritize those things? And if you need support, reach out for the, you know, the support you need in this moment. Like, don't even worry if you're, you know, doing hybrid schooling, don't worry about homeschool curriculum or schedules for kids that are at distance learning or, you know, any of that other stuff. Like, what are the stressors or what are the things that you need to be worrying about and focusing on and thinking about and trying to work through? And find solutions and resources for those situations, and kind of just like shut out what everyone else is doing, because there's so much chatter and there's so much noise and everybody's kind of talking about it. I think it can be really easy to like kind of pile on what everyone else might need too, but just kind of like tunnel vision more into what are we doing, and where are we at, and what do we need today, and kind of take it day by day and do the best you can. There's no perfect way to do any of this, and I think everyone's making the right choices for themselves. There's no right or wrong way to do this, like where everybody, teachers, everybody is doing the best they can, and I really believe that. So just lots of grace, and just focus on your own situation and go from there.
Yeah. Gary, you want to go next?
Sarah nailed it.
I know. I was like, what am I going to say?
No, we're good.
I'm like wondering, is there anything else? And I think that, as we were talking through all of this, it takes time. Everything takes time. There's not, we could easily try to implement quick fixes. And I mean, that's kind of how, sometimes people need that. And if that's needed, then that's fine. We're not saying that that's wrong. But I think that, the things that we do at the Accountability Success Circle are more of this is like a long-term growth plan, right? We're trying to keep things easy because we don't want you to burn out. We understand that you're busy and you have a lot of other things going on, but to have a community rally behind you and what you're doing, no matter what, if it's similar to what other people in the community are doing or not, but everybody's on their own personal journey, and how can we, slowly learn from each other and support each other as we go through these ups and downs of life, because it's a long game for sure. So making sure that is, and so I guess we'll just start to wrap it up. But before we go, Sarah, do you want to plug, we'll plug your book one more time, but you want to tell everybody how they can reach you if they want more? Because I know that there's a workbook portion of this book too, right?
Yeah,
so I'm going to go buy that.
Yeah, that's the book, The Whole Self Lifestyle. This one's for working parents. And it is available on my website at argenalinstitute.com/books. And so that's the book. And that has a lot of the kind of like, hey, what are the struggles? Why are we struggling so much as working parents specifically? And it goes through the framework, everything, but then there's a workbook version of it where you can just go through and kind of, there's a lot of space for self-reflection and answering all the questions kind of for yourselves. So both of those are available, again, argenalinstitute.com/books. And everything else I do that's kind of my hub. So you can learn all about all the other things I do as well, but that's where you can start.
And she has so many, many resources, especially, for working parents. And she'd be my go-to if there's like, wait, there's a parent struggling with this exact thing. Does she have it? So that's awesome. And then for those of you who are not a part of the Accountability Success Circle, if you want to check us out, Sarah is a member. Me and Gary are members. We're all here to support you, and feel free to check us out at accountabilitysuccesscircle.com. So I think we are done. Thank you so much, Sarah, for being here. This is an awesome, awesome webinar. This is
amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. I have loved chatting with you both. This has been great.
And for those of you in the ASC, if you have questions, you can message her directly because she's a member now too. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you in next month's webinar. I think we're talking about boundaries, which is a great segue from this one into the next one. So yay, we'll talk to you soon. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.